On paper, Sloane Vierra had everything: a penthouse above the city, a $1 billion company she built from scratch, and the kind of reputation that made boardrooms hold their breath. But behind her glass walls lived a secret she couldn't fix with money or precision, a daughter who barely spoke outside their home. Every therapist, every system, every promise had failed. Then, one ordinary Monday, a crooked slide in a small neighborhood park and a stranger's paper bag of muffins unraveled the silence. What happened next would rewrite both their lives forever. The morning the city decided to be kind, the glass tower poured gold light across the river, and the sky turned the color of a bruised pear before Clean Blue stepped in and said it was ready to work. If the skyline had a habit, it was to watch Sloane Vierra make and keep promises. She was the kind of CEO journalists described as a force, because every other word felt too small. She was precision in silk, a calendar with a heartbeat, a woman who could turn integers into buildings and buildings into empires. She had built Nuvela, the subscription logistics company that folded time into boxes and made inconvenience a vintage flavor. A decade into her reign, she had a penthouse that faced 3 bridges and an early morning routine that felt like sparring. Green juice, an email blitz, and a sprint through headlines that mentioned her name too many times to feel real. The only place she let mess exist was in the rose-colored nursery that had slowly become a museum to silence. June's room wasn't quiet in the usual sense. It was a quiet that pressed like a velvet sleeve, plush and heavy. There were picture books with soft animals whose mouths looked half open, as if about to tell a secret, and a line of wooden birds arranged by shadists that June had organized in perfect, unbreakable sequence. On the nightstand sat a music box Sloane had wound every evening since her daughter's 2nd birthday, because the music said what Sloane could not. Now June was 4, and the words that lived in the space behind her eyes rarely crossed into air. At home sometimes, on the smallest mornings when the kettle steamed and Sloane's hair was still damp from the shower, June would whisper a breath against the world, up more blue. But outside, her voice retreated like the day's first deer back into trees. Doctors called it selective mutism. Therapists called it anxiety. Her ex-husband called less and less, until his number felt like a broken doorbell. Sloane, for all her competence, for all the airports she could outrun and product timelines she could thread like a seamstress, couldn't promise language to her child. She could buy the finest specialists, schedule social stories and occupational therapy appointments, and stand politely unclothed under the fluorescent dissection of mommy forums, collecting tips that she turned into systems. No pressure, soft eye contact, model speech, celebrate attempts. She could build a world of routine and safe choices. What she couldn't do was make June speak where strangers might listen. "We'll go slow," she told herself. "We'll be patient." Her driver, Isidro, brought the car round at 7:15 exactly, and for once she wasn't headed to the office. If any of the board members had been in the foyer, they would have fainted. Mondays were for corralling whales. But the company had executed a clean acquisition the week before. Analysts were sated. The calendar said float. Her assistant's hopeful way of creating an hour that could be stolen back. Sloane decided to steal it for June. "Which park?" Isidro asked, eyes half tilting to the rear view with the practiced warmth of someone who had known them since before June's hair grew past her shoulders. "The small one," Sloane said, "south of the library, the one with the crooked slide." June's eyes lifted at that, a flash of recognition passing over them like sunlight across deep water. She clutched her rabbit Pippin close. Pippin's ears had been kneaded into thinness, the velvet rubbed raw in the way of things that are loved, as if they might disappear. June wore a sweater the color of dove eggs and boots with daisies on the soles. Sloane wore an untucked linen blouse because the day deserved softness. The park near the library was modest in a city that had learned to disguise wealth as taste. No artisanal play structures forged in Scandinavian maple, no sign declaring some family's generosity in serif. It had metal swings that squeaked and a sandbox rimmed by a low stone wall where tulips tried their luck. The playground's paint was a touch sun-chalked, and the slide leaned like it was listening to something children said in secret. The air smelled like bakeries and last night's rain. There were 3 nannies with lattes and bright leggings, one older man coaxing a dog into checking his phone's camera, and a boy with a red backpack whose straps flapped as he ran circles around the bench. On another bench sat a man about Sloane's age, early 30s or maybe late, wearing jeans that belonged to a day that needed to be flexible and a gray hoodie with the cuffs ghosted by flour or chalk. Beside him, on the ground, a paper bag with a bakery logo softened with grease. His hair was the kind that curled when it felt seen, dark at the roots and lighter at the edges. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching his son, not with the anxious hawk stare Sloane knew she wore, but with something like listening. She and June took the long route around the sandbox because June liked to watch and then decide. Sloane watched her daughter stand at the lip of the sand, her small body tension coiled, eyes wide and beautiful, and so often sideways. A boy from preschool, was that Felix, spotted June and waved, the way children do, which is to say, like a flag with no subtlety. June made the smallest movement that might have been a nod or a thought. Sloane's heart pinged in the bone cage of her ribs. Okay, she thought, we're here. We made it. She exhaled and let the morning be what it was, which was not a meeting and not a crisis and not a flight. She perched on the low wall and tried not to measure. The sand was damp, perfect for sculpting. June crouched and dragged a finger through it, drawing lines that became roads, that became bridges, that became tracks for something invisible only she could see. When the kite appeared, it was not a kite at all, but a foam airplane with bright blue wings and a nose that looked too soft to cause harm. The boy with the red backpack threw it, and it swooped, a neat arc of possibility skimming over June's head before gliding to a stop by the tulips. The boy yelped with the joy of physics and sprinted. The man in the hoodie rose half a fraction, ready to intercept if the flight path entered someone's coffee. "Nice throw, Theo," he called. He looked at June, then to Sloane, and nodded that gentle city nod that says, "We live near one another, we share oxygen." Theo aimed again, but this time he looked at June like a person who has something to include. He walked over, not too close, and held out the plane as if it were a question. "Want to try?" he asked. His voice was bright glass. June looked at the plane without looking at Theo. She could feel Sloane watching her not watch, an electric loop of love and fear. The man in the hoodie added nothing. He stood where he was and let the air belong to silence, too. Theo tried again, less question now, and a more invitation without pressure. "You can throw it like this," he mimed, slow motion, arm back, elbow soft. He brought the nose to the sky in a pantomime of worship. Or like this. He swooped it close to the ground so the wheels that weren't wheels grazed sand. June reached out her hand and stopped just short of touching. Her fingers hovered like a little animal sniffing the world. "Hey," the man said, voice steady as a shelf. He crouched so he was small. He didn't address June. He addressed the sand. "I'm Luca, that's Theo. This plane is named H.M. Theo, what did we name it today?" "Blueberry Dash," Theo said instantly, as if the plane named itself each morning like weather. "Yesterday it was Captain Zoom." "That's right," Luca said. "Blueberry Dash is brave when the wind is medium, but cautious when the wind is rude." He looked at the sky as if to ask its opinion. "Is the wind medium or rude right now?" Theo lifted his face and considered. "Medium." "Good," Luca said, conspiratorial but not cloying. "Blueberry Dash appreciates accuracy." He placed the plane on the sand between himself and June, and tapped the wing like you might tap an animal to show it's okay. "If anyone wants a turn, the pilot seat is available after the next lap." Theo threw the plane again. The arc, the swoop! And June's hand followed it in the air, invisible mimicry making a shape. When it landed this time, nearer to June than before, she did something Sloane had only seen at kitchen tables and bedtime. She leaned forward and took the chance presented to her. She picked up Blueberry Dash. She traced her thumb along the seam of the wing as if reading. Her face went soft in the places where it often grew rigid. She walked to the spot where Theo had stood, feet planted, a solemn little pilot. She pulled her arm back. The first throw was a question. The plane tipped and tumbled in a brave flop. "Nice," Luca said. He didn't clap, he didn't chirp, he simply dignified. "He's getting to know you." June bent, a serious captain collecting her ship. The second throw had a little more faith. The plane skimmed, then nosed up as if changing its mind. "Better," Luca murmured, "the way you murmur to courage when it's practicing." Theo whooped. Sloane watched something she had tried to orchestrate with sticker charts and clinical schedules happen because someone had made room for the world to do the work. The third throw curved like an ear. The plane cut clean, slicing air into a line that even the wind admitted was respectable, and landed with the softest puff. June smiled, not a show smile, but the kind that tips a tooth to the sun. Theo came closer, only what June would allow, and brandished the brown paper bag toward them like a treasure map. "We brought muffins," he said, "blueberry and lemon poppy, and a chocolate that fell apart, so we tested it." Luca gave the smallest shrug that apologized for sugar. "We get the day started with bribes," he said. His eyes moved to Sloane, then away, a respectful oscillation. He had ordinary hands, which is to say they looked like they often did something. He had a small scar on his left wrist, shaped like a pale comma. June's fingers hovered over the bag, then darted inside and pinched a bit of lemon poppy seed between small forefinger and thumb. She placed it on her tongue with solemn ceremony, as if fueling flight were a holy act. The lemon made her eyes widen, and she looked up, startled by joy, the way you look up at wind chimes that have remembered a song you forgot. "Zing, right?" Luca said, unbothered by silence. "I make that one too tart by accident, and then keep making the accident on purpose." He paused. "I mean, the bakery does. I just wash dishes and lift sacks and sometimes break eggs the right way." "You bake," Sloane said, because she heard the way he untangled modesty from fact. "And you title planes." "And buses," he deadpanned. "We named the bus on the way here Sir Huffs-a-Lot." He had opinions. Sloane felt herself laugh and then felt the vulnerability of that, how laughter had become rare in the last 2 years, in the way rain becomes rare in a city that forgets the ocean. She glanced at June carefully. June had taken approximately 6 seconds more to warm to the lemon poppy seed, and then her hand, gentle as a moth, moved toward the bag again with intention. By the third pinch, Luca had folded the bag toward June, as if making a bowl she was allowed to choose from. It was when a small brown dog barreled into view, an ungoverned, joyous loaf with a wag so sincere it moved him like a wind-up toy, that the day threaded itself into a knot of grace. The dog, whose name would later turn out to be Willow, wore a red bandana and a smile. He barreled toward Theo, then toward June, then back toward Luca, drawing an ecstatic triangle. Luca made a sound that was almost a bark, a low, playful woof that said, "Game on." The dog froze, then stalked, then leaped as if they were in the middle of a choreography. "Rescue," Luca said for Sloane's benefit. "He thinks every child is the moon." June knelt, a slow, controlled descent, and offered her hand the way the therapist had taught her. Knuckles forward, fingers curled in, space for a nose. Willow obliged, sniffing with the serious attention of a professor tasting soup. Then June whispered something no one but Sloane was close enough to hear. It wasn't a word yet. It was the tremor before. "She talks at home," Sloane said, meaning, "Please don't take our quiet as absence." She didn't add, "I am a woman whose life is made of speaking, whose prologues build industries, and I cannot coax even one free word from my daughter in public." Luca nodded as if Sloane had said everything necessary. "My son used to go quiet at school," he said without fanfare. "He's better now. Took time. We learned tricks." "What tricks?" The question flew out of Sloane before she could calibrate it. "The kind you probably already know," he said gently. "Follow their play. Echo. Don't direct. Model without expecting. Offer choices that let no be a complete sentence. Pretend the pressure isn't in the room, even when your entire chest is made of it." He made his voice so light it sounded like an umbrella. "I'm not a professional. I just live in the neighborhood of this." June had both hands in Willow's fur now, kneading rhythmically her forehead near the dog's forehead. The dog, pleased, let out a huff that felt like a blessing. "Do you want to throw the plane again?" Theo asked, inching closer but stopping where June's energy said, "Stop." He rolled the word "want" like a marble between them. June's fingers flexed. She looked at the plane, then at Luca's hand, then at the dog. Sloane felt her own face calibrate. "Please don't beg the moment. Don't load it with your needs." The wind tugged the edges of the day, reminding them it was here. And then it happened. It was not dramatic. No thunder rolled. A sparrow hopped down from the fence and cocked its head as if to listen, and somewhere in the distance a bus sighed. June's shoulders softened and her mouth picked a shape from all the shapes it had practiced in the privacy of their walls. She looked at Luca's face, maybe because it was new, maybe because it was steady, maybe because it wasn't asking, and in a voice that had only been a rumor in public until that instant, she said, clear enough for the tulips and the sky to hear, "More." The word hung like a ribbon caught on a branch, and time, that busy accountant, put down its pen. Sloane froze so completely that the cars on the avenue might have reeled, confused by the stillness of something that moved them. She felt all the meetings she'd skipped and scheduled and half paid attention to, all the people who had described her as tireless and formidable and efficient, recede like a tide so far it became a line she couldn't believe she'd crossed. Her mouth opened and closed. She made no sound because the word was not hers, and the moment must not be stolen. Tears rose so fast they warmed her eyes and then cooled them with their own breeze. Luca didn't move to claim it either. He simply picked up the plane and handed it to June as if she'd asked for it the way anyone asks for anything, like a person, not a miracle. Theo didn't cheer. He looked at his new friend and grinned like a co-conspirator. Sloane took a breath that entered her like medicine. It came out as a laugh and a sob at once. June threw the plane. It flew. Sloane pressed her hand to her mouth as if to keep herself together physically, because otherwise she might have risen into that low city sky and turned into weather. She had felt joy before, of course. She had felt accomplishment, ribbon cuttings and product launches, and late-night emails that solved something everyone else had thought impossible. But this was the kind of joy that unstitched and rewove. It found the small girl Sloane who used to wait in laundromats and drew in the air with dryer lint, the teenager who studied at a false window table in a basement apartment, the woman who had learned to barter softness for access. It walked into their shared body and said, "We can be new." She crouched and looked at June and spoke the one word the therapists had said to hold like a feather, not overuse, not press. More? June looked back and nodded, smiling the way light smiles on water, and said it again, with a little more voice, with a little more of the world inside it. More. They played until the lemon poppy seed bag was feather light, and Theo had invented an airport, an air traffic control tower out of a fallen branch, and Willow had made 2 new circuits around the swings and collected 4 pats from different tiny hands. When the clouds shifted like a thought you cannot keep, Lucas stood and stretched. "We're going to head to school," he said to Sloane, the tone of a person who has crept up to a line and then stepped back because it is not his to cross. "We're late already, which is our brand." "Thank you," Sloane said. The words felt insufficient. They were the words one uses for a cup of coffee or a polite door hold. She wanted to say, "You just turned our story." She wanted to pour stock options into his paper bag and show him a chart of gratitude. She wanted to ask him to keep showing up in their mornings like the sun, but she knew what too much felt like when you were trying to keep a small person from hiding in their own chest. So she said thank you and let the thankness fill the air like cinnamon. Luca nodded. He wrote something on the back of a receipt and tore it along a crease with fingers that had learned the art of tearing straight by necessity. He handed it to her. "This is my number. Not because I think you need advice," he smiled. "Just because proximity can be helpful. We come here most mornings. It's easier to be brave when the same faces exist." Sloane took the slip of paper like a relic. "Willow's here too," she asked June, casual as possible, planting future seeds. June touched Willow's ear. The dog blinked as if blessing a sacred text. After they left, Sloane sat on the bench longer than the weather advised. She texted her assistant to move her first 2 calls. The reply came like lightning. "Of course. Everything okay?" She typed and deleted, "I think we've discovered a new room in our house and settled on—" Yes. They went home the long way. June fell asleep in her car seat, hand still fisting Pippin's ear, lips parted around the ghost of a lemon seed. Sloane looked at the city and felt it rearrange. Money made certain doors open. Time was the real currency, presence the wire transfer. She had always known this intellectually. Now her bones knew it. That afternoon, in a boardroom that made even the ambitious feel like invitations, she sat through a presentation on optimizing warehouse flows and watched numbers flow like a long river. She made decisions with the clean swiftness of a swift blade. But when a director suggested a new client relations initiative that would require weekend roadshows for the next 2 months, she did something she hadn't done before. She said, "I can't." The word turned the air to ice for a beat. Her general counsel blinked. Her CFO looked at his pen as if it had betrayed him. "I need mornings that belong to my daughter," she said, not apologizing and not explaining further. If she had been any other person, maybe someone would have rolled their eyes. But the room had learned value from her. It wouldn't forget now. The second morning at the park, they arrived earlier. The playground was a bowl holding new light. Luca and Theo were there, and Willow, who wore a yellow bandana and the same smile. Theo had a new plane named Thunder P. June wore a T-shirt with a strawberry that looked like a heart. She clutched Pippin in one hand and Sloane's sleeve with the other, but after 3 steps she let go of the sleeve and only kept the rabbit, which felt like progress, measured in delicate centimeters. Theo greeted her with a solemn salute that made her laugh inside her eyes. Luca held up his hands and wiggled his fingers slowly, a small hello that required nothing back. June moved to the sand and began to draw roads again. Luca sat nearby and drew a little house, then a little tree beside it, then a spiral that could be a galaxy or a snail. He didn't label anything. He just let the pictures exist, an invitation rather than a test. June drew a second tree that leaned toward his tree. Luca drew a square between them that could be a bench. June drew 3 dots on the bench and stopped. Sloane sat very still. Theo threw Thunder P and then offered it to June. She touched the wing and didn't take it. Luca nodded as if she had made a brilliant decision. He turned a pebble over with one finger and put it on the bench square. "Do you think our tree's like lemon poppy seed?" he asked nobody in particular. June's mouth shaped something, a thin ghost. The sound came, the smallest flake of voice, and hid again. Luca didn't move his eyes to her face. He just waited. The morning had that expensive, sweet quiet that cities give when you ask nicely. This time, when the voice came, it brought a friend. "Tree eat seeds?" It was mosaic speech, tile by tile, but the pattern was a cathedral in disguise. Sloane kept her hands on her knees because if she clasped them, her bones might ring like glass. She forced herself to breathe as one breath does when it realizes it has been shallow for years. She looked at Luca and found him looking at the sand as if conversations with trees were as ordinary as receipts. When they finally spoke directly, it was not about the miraculous. It was about school lunch and sneakers and a small garden behind the bakery where Luca coaxed tomatoes into sweetness on a sun-starved lot. He talked like he cooked, specific, without performance. She told him about the bees on their terrace garden and the book June had liked to chew on before she learned to read it in her own way, turning the pages and whispering what came next like a spell. He told her that his wife died 3 years ago, which he said like a calendar entry, and not like a sob, though it was a sob. Cancer that acted like a thief and took a Tuesday and turned it into an ending. He said it because death is a thing that becomes less monstrous when put in sunlight. He wore the fact like you'd wear a scar, not hidden, not flaunted, simply the truth of skin. That night, Sloane stood in the kitchen while the soup cooled and watched June line up the wooden birds. The birds did not have to be in the same order as usual. June placed the blue one next to the yellow one and left an unexpected gap. She looked at Sloane and then at the gap, and in a voice more full than the morning said, "Bird, wait, friend?" She put the red bird in the gap. The room tilted and righted like a boat. Sloane sat on the floor with her daughter and did not move until the soup was cold. In the weeks that followed, the park became the temple where their mornings went to pray. Not every day was progress. Some days June preferred to watch, to press her cheek into Willow's ribs and hum. Some days the sky decided the wind was rude and the planes flew like wet paper. Some days Sloane canceled a meeting and felt the old reprimands flutter at the edge of her palm like a moth that had forgotten how to land. But many days June added a shell to the language she was building, a new curve to the sound of herself. Ball, throw, again, lemon, willow, Theo. Once, quietly near the tulips, she said Luca like it was an ingredient you add last. It was impossible to keep the city from eventually seeing. A photographer with a polite smile and a hat that tried too hard to be anonymous snapped a shot of a woman who usually lived in the places where windows didn't open, crouched in the sand in jeans with powdered sugar on the knee, laughing at a dog. The article that came did not feel malicious so much as curious. Vierra's new morning routine, single dad with a plane. The photo of Luca lifting Theo to reach a branch for a game of airplane refueling made them look like a possibility Sloane had not allowed herself to learn the shape of. She found herself in the position of a person who publicly had everything and privately wanted something ordinary, a candid moment at a playground to remain only that. The board predictably had opinions. Optics, they said. We support any efforts to be relatable, they said, which made Sloane want to remove her own skin. A rival blog published a piece with the wrong tone. Billionaire Mommy's new project, Single Father. Cues of class were thrown like darts, hoodie, paper bag bakery breakfasts, until Luca's life became a costume someone tried to wear to a party. She wanted to shield him. She called, voice unsteady for the first time since she'd learned what a P and L was, and told him she was sorry. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter can be a shield. "We will live," he said. "There are worse problems than being seen with a woman who carries herself like a lighthouse." He paused. "But if it gets weird for Theo, I'll hide for a while." It did get weird, then abruptly weirder. June's father, Caleb, a venture capitalist with a smile that worked as a business card, suddenly remembered his daughter. He had left in a slow drift of detachment, the way busy men sometimes do, returning from trips with extra T-shirts and less presents, scheduling their family-like meetings they had learned could be rescheduled. He had phoned less, then hardly, then never. Months had passed with a hollow that sounded like a voice one floor away, speaking to someone else. He appeared now with an almost visible publicist and an apology that tasted like chalk. He wanted to be seen wanting. "Let's do brunch," he said. "Let's make a plan," he said. "I'm sorry," he said, and some part of it might have been true. Sloane looked at the man she had loved at 23 and built a house with at 27, and watched leave at 30, and in her temples something like a tide started to pull out. "We can talk about schedules," she said. June clung to Pippin and looked at the floor. In the week after Caleb reappeared, June's language at the park thinned like soup when you forget to stir and let the heat take its water. She stayed near Willow. She took the plane and returned it, and took it again like a metronome. 2 days in a row she said nothing at all. The silence was not an absence, but a choice, and it felt like a shadow that would leave if they did not chase it. "Change is a lot," Lucas said. He stood, hands in pocket, posture saying, "Patience." Sloane approached the week with the tenderness of someone carrying a layered cake up a steep staircase. She told her board she required a month of mornings free, and watched them try to decide if saying no would be the kind of PR their grandchildren would talk about at holidays. She apologized for nothing. She moved meetings into nights and discovered that her brain did not burn as well at midnight as it had at 25. But she made it burn anyway because this mattered more.